Well, welcome in, welcome in. Welcome to the Around the Table Sports live stream. Every Monday I go live. You never want to miss it. And we talk about a bevy of things, but of course, we have always got to talk about the weekend of football we just experienced and what a weekend of football it was. There is a whole lot for us to talk about. There is a whole lot of games we need to get into. But where I really want to start is with the ACC because the ACC this year has been bad. It has not been good. And it's really surprising when you look at some of the teams that are in the ACC and the expectations individuals had for the ACC going into this year, namely Clemson. Clemson is a team that up to this point has struggled mightily. They have not looked good. And if any of you saw the video I did earlier, I am absolutely blown away that Clemson finds themselves as a top 25 team, especially when the best argument we can give the Tigers is that they have a loss to the number 2 team in the nation and that they held them without really scoring on the offensive side of the ball. If that's your best argument for why you should be top 25, it's very hard for me to buy into that argument. Clemson needs to be thinking somebody up above that they are still top 25. I think they're a good team still. Let's not get anything mistaken. When you look at the collection of talent Dabo Sweeney has put together from recruiting to development, they have got players on that team, but it's not coming together right now. And so I was very surprised about Clemson being ranked. I'm really interested in hearing from y'all on that as you trickle in here. Let me know what you thought about the AP rankings because that was really interesting. And at the time Clemson had lost to Georgia, one of the things I'd talked about was maybe this isn't the end of the world, depending on what happens with the rest of the ACC. But the rest of the ACC has largely imploded. I mean, we look at North Carolina and they have not been banner to this year. They lost their second game against Georgia Tech. And it's stuff like that. Miami has struggled mightily this part of the season. Boston College right now may be one of the best teams in the ACC. So that's where we are with the ACC. Something I think many people didn't expect. I mean, I think we all kind of expected it to be a question mark outside of Clemson, but I think many of us had Clemson as being some sort of staple for the ACC to hang on to. And now there's no way. I mean, unless a complete implosion of college football occurs, there's no way ACC makes the college football playoffs. There's just no way. And right now they're fighting for New Year's 6 games. That's just where we are with the ACC. Really interested in hearing from y'all. Let me know what you think there, because it's just mind-blowing how much change has happened under such a short time period within this college football season. I mean, we talk about Clemson, we can have them as our banner, and we can have them as the one we point to, but then we look at Ohio State. I mean, just look at the top 10 when we started this year relative to the top 10 we see right now, and there's been some changes, and it's going to keep changing. That's the beautiful thing about this season. Nobody is safe. You have teams that have came out and looked really solid, and then the next week they follow it up with a bit of a flat performance. So it's going to be a great college football season, and week 4 I thought was really indicative of that. The ACC is struggling, but then you look around the country and other teams are really propping themselves up. One such team that I think is probably the coolest story of the 2021 season is Arkansas. Arkansas going into this year, a lot of people thought they'd be better, myself included. But I would be flat out lying if I said that I thought that they would be as good as they are right now as quickly as they are. What Sam Pittman and company have done there is really impressive, and it really needs to be talked about. Light needs to be shed on it because Arkansas has got their second ranked win of the year. No matter how you feel about Texas, when they played Texas, they were ranked. They handled Texas. Then they go on to Texas A&M and handle Texas A&M. Now, personally, I think Texas A&M was a little bit overrated, but regardless, that was a top team that they went in there and handled. Arkansas has a senior group, and any team playing Arkansas really needs to watch out and not sleep on what they are. They're a very solid defensive team, and they're getting better offensively. So they're a team that we really have to watch out for. Chicken says the extra year has made more parity throughout, and I absolutely agree. I mean, look, this year is so interesting because of the parity we see throughout college football, and it's something that's only going to continue, right? That parity isn't going to be relegated to just the early portions of this year. especially if you look at how some teams are developing or a lack of development altogether, which is even more worrisome. And we're going to talk about some of those here in a bit. But the SEC right now is really primed, right? The SEC is really primed, and Arkansas has got a really tough schedule ahead of them. And a lot of teams who were looking at Arkansas on their SEC schedules and thinking, okay, we get another win, are now looking at that Arkansas game thinking, man, that's now a game we have to strap up for. I mean, I'm not saying Arkansas was a game that you ever really just slept on, but there's no denying how good they are this year as opposed to years past. And it started last year, in complete fairness, right? That's something I've talked about when I've brought up Arkansas, is how Barry Odom had that defense looking, but the rest of the team has really come together strongly. And I saw a tweet earlier. I can't remember who it's from, but they made an interesting point talking about coaching hires and how, especially in the modern era of college football, the sexy coaching hire is usually your high-powered offensive guy, right? Because that's just where college football is moving. You get these high-powered offensive minds. But then you look at Arkansas, you look at Oregon, and they have guys that understand what it takes to win the battle of the trenches as their head coach, and look how they're doing. Oregon is a really solid team, top 5 right now, with a great win against Ohio State, with 3 of their premier players out. That's a really solid win. Oregon is a team that we need to watch. We need to respect. We look at Arkansas and we can see how far they've come. Because at the end of the day, as much as offense is now king of college football, it all starts and ends with the line of scrimmage. If you can't win the line of scrimmage, you're going to have a very hard time winning football games. It doesn't matter who you are. It really doesn't matter how talented you are. If you cannot win the line of scrimmage, it's going to be an uneven display. I think the perfect example of this goes back to that LSU-UCLA game. UCLA came out this year. Everybody knew exactly what they were going to do from game one, right? Everybody saw what a powerful rushing attack UCLA had. And when LSU went in there, there was no question as to the balance of talent between UCLA and LSU. UCLA can get talent. There's no question about it. LSU's perennially a top 10 recruiting team in the nation, getting 5 stars in like it's going out of style. And you look at Louisiana as a recruiting ground, my goodness. So you have all that talent concentrated there, and UCLA whipped them because they whipped them at the line of scrimmage. Arkansas is doing the exact same thing, right? Arkansas is whipping teams at the line of scrimmage just like UCLA did to LSU. And if you can whip teams at the line of scrimmage, you vastly put the game in your favor. You might not win, but you have a much higher chance at winning. And because of that, Arkansas is a great story this year. They're into the top 10. When was the last time y'all saw Arkansas ranked inside the top 10? That's wild. Good for them, though. They absolutely have earned it. They have Georgia coming up this week. That's going to be a game. That's going to be a really good game, because I think as much as people are interested in seeing exactly where Arkansas is, let's also not discount that Arkansas can help show us kind of where Georgia is. Now, Georgia already had a test in Clemson, but I think we now look at Clemson with some major question marks, right? How much of an answer was that Clemson win for Georgia? I don't know. I don't know anymore, because Clemson has disappointed incredibly. So I don't know how much stock I put into that Georgia win over Clemson. Do I still think it's a good win? Yes, there's no doubt about it that I think it's a good win. How good? I'm not sure. That's why this Arkansas game is going to be so intriguing, because we'll find out who Arkansas is. Win, lose, or draw, or however that goes, right? As the saying goes, win, lose, or draw. We'll find out who Arkansas is, but they'll also show us who Georgia is. That's going to be a great game. Now, Georgia, if you are looking at this from a Dogs fan, you get some major players back, some players that are game changers within any Saturday when you strap up. Darnell Washington, Tyke Smith. Tyke Smith was graded as one of the highest rated transfers of the offseason. I completely agree. When you look at what Georgia needed in the secondary and what he offered, Georgia having inexperience at the nickel position, Tyke Smith, Pro Football Focus, rated as one of the highest graded nickels in the nation. I mean, that kid is really, really athletic. That's going to be big, him coming in there. And Darnell Washington, the absolute mismatch at tight end. He is going to be someone that's going to be really interesting to see how he's implemented into this offense. They found success without him in there. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do with him in there. Jaden, he says, if Georgia wins convincingly, do you think they move up to 1? That's tough because as much as that's a great question, we also have to remember who Alabama plays this week. And Alabama has a very tough game against Ole Miss. I don't know how Ole Miss isn't rated within the top 10. I mean, I'm certainly not going to argue it this week because they're coming off of a bye. That really doesn't make sense. I can't give them an argument over Florida when Florida had to go play an SEC opponent. No matter how you view Tennessee, they had to play a Division I college football opponent while Ole Miss had a bye week. Do I think Ole Miss is a top 10 team? Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about it. I really do. I don't know how good their defense is. We're going to find that out this weekend, but their defense is playing harder. And there is something to that. I'm not saying they have a world-beating defense, but if your defense is playing with some want to, with some discipline and some effort, you can make some things shake. You can absolutely make some things shake. And it's why a lot of people were upset with Alabama's defense at times coming out flat. And I think that's what people meant when they said flat. So do I think Georgia could move up to number 1? It all depends on how they win if they beat Arkansas. It all depends on how they win relative to how that Alabama-Ole Miss game goes. Because let's say Alabama-Ole Miss is a fantastic game. Alabama wins by 10 points. You can't drop Alabama. I mean, they've won every game. They just beat another ranked opponent at that point. And it's an opponent that we know how dangerous their offense is. I mean, Lane Kiffin is an offensive mastermind. Matt Corral right now is leading or one of the leaders in the Heisman vote. The Heisman vote means nothing in the early preseason and right now. It's just a fun talking piece for us fans to sit here and talk about, have fun conversations and theories about. But Matt Corral is in that conversation for a reason, right? He's there because his play has been superb up to this point. Bryce Young is there because his play has been superb up to this point. And so because of that, if Alabama wasn't playing Ole Miss, I think, Jaden, the answer would be a much more possible yes, because it's still football. We still have to see the why. Nuance is important. And I think I'm big on that. And I think a lot of you are picking up on that, right? Like, even in games that a team should win, there are nuances to how they go about winning schematically. How did these things occur? And we can take something from that. And that's why I say it really just depends. But given who Alabama plays this week, if Alabama wins, it's going to be very hard for them to be jumped because they would have beaten a top 15 opponent. And that would be their second top 15 opponent this year beaten. Third ranked opponent this year. I mean, Miami, not ranked anymore. They don't deserve to be. They haven't been playing well, but they were ranked when Alabama played them. Alabama handled them. Alabama beat Florida in a tough game, but they beat Florida. Florida has a vaunted rushing attack this year. Don't get it mixed up between the Florida of last year and the Florida of this year, right? Because it's easy to do as fans. We look at a team and we say, Florida is a team that didn't have any rushing threat last year, but they're a team this year that has the number 1 rushing attack in the nation. I mean, they're a different team. They're a good team. They're a really good team. Grantham's defense has gotten better. The pass rush is there. That's the one thing I said about their defense last year was the pass rush, but it's continuing to get better. They have names along the front. So it's really interesting. Chris Kennedy says Ole Miss will be the ultimate test against Alabama's middle linebackers. Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to get into that a little bit more when we get to that in particular, but that is a mismatch, and that's a mismatch we're seeing across college football, across the whole of college football. It's not just relegated to Alabama. That's not an excuse for Alabama. Let's not get anything twisted. That has got to get better. But there are a few teams right now that when you watch them play, the middle linebacker position in college football is being picked on right now. And part of it is just, I think it's still early, right? I think in Alabama's case, you have To'o, who's a phenomenal communicator, but I think that the announcing crew of last week's game made a great point in saying sometimes his communication might lead to him not really focusing on what his job is. Communication in that position is meaningless if you're not executing your job. That comes first. If you do your job, it allows everybody to do their job. If you can do your job, then you can communicate elsewhere. So part of it is that, part of it is the new, and part of it is just the way offenses attack defenses now. Think about the tight end, Chris. I mean, you know, we talk about how all of these teams are utilizing these players, and then we look at Florida last year. We look at Georgia this year. We look at Alabama this year. And they have mismatches at the tight end position that really can pick on middle linebackers. And then we talk about the running backs out the backfield. I mean, running backs that can catch the football are becoming all the craze right now. And how many times have y'all sat there on a Saturday and watched a wheel route for a huge gain out the backfield? I mean, I know I had my journal one Saturday and I was just ticking away during games. Wheel route, wheel route, wheel route. College football is so intriguing right now, but you're 100% right, Chris. We're going to talk a bit more about that. James asked, what do you think about A&M dropping 8, but Texas dropping 16 when both lost to Arkansas? Yeah, I think I don't have a great answer for that because I think you make a great point. I think that Texas A&M has won some this year, but they haven't won in a fashion that's indicative of them retaining the rank they do. Whereas Texas lost to Arkansas, and then they've been better after. I have to wonder, James, and I'm interested in hearing from y'all on this. I'm very interested in hearing from y'all on this. So let me know. I have to wonder how much of it is the perception of having a quarterback change midway through the season. I don't know if that's the reason. Now, if we're saying that Arkansas drops mightily and Texas still isn't ranked, maybe I don't have as big of a problem with this conversation. But I do agree. I think we're still putting a little too much faith in Arkansas. I'm sorry, not too much faith in Arkansas. Not too much. They've earned the faith. I'm very sorry. This is what happens when you do it live. We're still putting a little bit too much faith in Texas A&M. I think it might be because they still have a very good defense. I mean, when we look at the players on that defense, they have some talent on that defense. How good is it? Remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. But you know, they gave up 20 points to Arkansas, all the while their offense couldn't sustain a drive. I mean, they couldn't get anything going. Their line couldn't block. I mean, Trey Williams had a field day. It's very hard to gauge where Texas A&M's defense is right now when their offense is giving them no help. So, but I do completely agree. I don't know why one dropped much more than the other. I really can't answer that because I think that Texas A&M is a little bit overrated still. I thought that going into the year, and it wasn't just the quarterback position. For those of you that have been around the channel, you'll know I've said this constantly. It's one thing replacing Kellen Mond. That's cool. That's tough, right? Like that's going to be very difficult to do. Kellen Mond places himself in the history books of Texas A&M football. Replacing that is no easy matter. Replacing that when you have to replace a complete offensive line is a whole other conversation. It is a whole different conversation. And nobody really talked about that. Everybody was saying, oh, you know, Texas A&M's defense is going to be solid. And I don't disagree with that. I don't. They have got some dudes on that defense. I don't know how good they are. I'm going to be the first to admit that. I'm not sure how good they are. But they have very talented players on that defense. And the defense is not the reason why that Texas A&M lost that game. It isn't. Their offense is non-existent. I don't know. But I don't know where Texas A&M goes from here. Calzada did not have a good game, but how much of this can we put on Calzada when your offensive line can't block a three-man front? Certainly Calzada isn't devout of blame. There's no argument in which he could be, but how much of it can we put on him? It's a question I ask myself constantly right now, and I don't have the answer for it, but it's a question I ask myself. Chicken says, we're going to find out about Oklahoma this Saturday. We play our kryptonite in Kansas State, and they get their quarterback back. And it's either we wake up or get slapped in place. Yeah, and their quarterback is a guy that's giving y'all trouble. And this is what I'll say. There is something to psychological warfare. There's a reason Nick Saban is a psychological mastermind and why he employs it. And top college football coaches do across the board. I don't mean to relegate that simply to Saban. My argument and my contention is not that he's the only one that does it. I'm just an Alabama fan. So it's easiest for me to relate to what it is Saban does because that's probably what I'm the most familiar with, just growing up researching anything I could about the program and how Saban operates. Psychological warfare is a very real thing, and K-State has no fear of Oklahoma. They have no fear of Oklahoma. And K-State has a very talented dude in Deuce Vaughn. Does K-State not have their quarterback or have their quarterback? Because if they don't have their quarterback, that's going to be different. But no matter what, to the point of they're not scared of OU. And there's something to be said of that. And because of that, let's talk about OU for a bit. Let's go back and talk about OU. Let's talk about the Big 12. Because the Big 12, you know, they don't, James. Okay, well then that changes a little bit, but they still have Deuce Vaughn. And remember that conversation that we had earlier when we're talking about linebackers and how linebackers have been hurt by how offenses are scheming. Deuce Vaughn is a dude that you can scheme to really hurt some inside linebackers. And OU's had some trouble in that regard. You remember before Nebraska, I talked about the pre-snap motion, and OU did a good job covering it to a degree, and then they'd get hit. So it's going to be interesting to see how OU deals with that. But if K-State doesn't have their starting quarterback back, you have to like Oklahoma's chances. And at a certain point, you have to figure the offense will click. Are they going to be a high-powered offense that we're used to seeing from Oklahoma? Maybe not. Maybe not. But I don't think that this is the offense, right? Maybe this offense isn't as good as we've come to expect, and that might be true. But I still can't believe that this is the offense that we're going to see throughout the rest of the year for Oklahoma. I will say this for the Big 12, though. They're very lucky that the ACC exists. I say that in jest. A lot of that is joking, but some of it is true, right? The Big 12 has been largely disappointing this year, right? And that's why I say I partially say this in jest. But the Big 12 has been disappointing, at least for me. I thought Iowa State would be a team that would at least show a pulse. Have any of you seen a pulse from Iowa State? I mean, to come in with as many super seniors and as much experience as Iowa State does, and to be as flat as they are, that's impressive. Like, it's almost impressive. I didn't think we'd see that. I didn't think Iowa State was a playoff team. And I always said that. I didn't think Iowa State was a playoff team, but I thought they'd be a good team. And sometimes I feel like I'm not clear in how I talk about things. I think there's a lot of good teams in college football. There's few great teams, and there's even fewer elite teams. Just because you're a good team doesn't mean you're going to make it to the college football playoff. You can be a good team and not be in the top 10. There's a lot of college football teams, and a lot of them are going to be good. More of them are going to be not good. Very few are going to be great, and the select few are elite. That's kind of how I always break that down. So if there's any ever confusion as to why you're thinking, oh, why is he saying this team is good? Because I kind of layer these, right? I don't think we can look at every team with the expectation of like an Alabama or in OU in the Big 12, where if you're not winning the Big 12 every single year, your season's a failure. That's rare. They're the exception, not the rule, right? They're the exception, not the rule. Do I think Texas beats TCU this week? That's actually another reason why I wanted to move on to the Big 12. As my light kills itself, don't worry about that thing. It's just terrible. Texas and TCU is going to be a very interesting game. TCU is a team that I was so surprised with this week. I mean, blown away at how they got handled by SMU. SMU is a good team, and Mordecai had himself a pretty good game. Saved the interceptions. That wasn't good, but 245 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, not good. 17-28. But the rushing attack for SMU, my goodness. 2 running backs going over 100 yards, 1 going over 150. So TCU really surprised me in how they were not able to handle SMU. And if you are Texas, you have to look at this and say, okay, well, if SMU had success running the ball, how can we emulate what SMU did to really hurt this TCU defense? Because Gary Patterson's a defensive guy. He's a defensive guy. And on the flip side, you're looking at how can you affect TCU's offense in a manner that stops their quarterback from doing what he wants to do. He's an athletic guy. And Zach Evans is a running back that I'm really interested in seeing how he continues to evolve. And I think the Texas game is going to be a game that if you love high school football recruiting and you follow it for more than just your team, you'll know about the Zach Evans story. It's one of the just wildest recruiting stories for no real particular reason, just the way everything went down. It's wild. A lot of people don't know he was actually TCU's first 5-star recruit. And in the same year, they got another kid who was rated as a 5-star transfer in from LSU. And so I'm very excited to see Zach Evans play and continue progressing for TCU. But I ultimately think Texas ends up getting that win. I think Texas gets the win because SMU put a blueprint down on how to attack TCU through the ground game. And, I saw a tweet earlier, not sure who it was from. They were saying Texas has the best running back room. I don't agree with that. But I would be remiss in saying Bijan isn't a top running back. I mean, y'all remember over the summer, I was irate when he was left off of the top 50 players in the nation for Pro Football Focus. There were a lot of those guys I agreed with, right? They were put on those top 50. I didn't understand how Bijan wasn't one of them. That kid is super talented. And SMU just put the blueprint. And you also have to remember, with this whole quarterback situation going on at Texas, what better team than for them really to work through some stuff on than TCU in the passing game? Gary Patterson, known for his defense, and now Sark gets to go against that. So Sark is going to be looking to stamp something here. I mean, we're talking about two high-powered minds in their respective craft. Sark on the offensive end, Gary Patterson on the defensive end. What more could you ask for out of this game? I cannot wait for this game. Good job bringing this game up, James. This is a game I cannot wait for. Do I think that this year will be a very interesting Red River rivalry? Yeah, so look, here's the thing with the Red River rivalry this year. Anytime you have two rival teams play and the rivalry is as bitter as Texas OU, you can almost toss preseason rankings out the room. It doesn't matter. So I had a feeling that might be each team's most competitive game because it tends to be that way. How many times, right? How many times going back have we walked into this game and the outside world thought, oh, well, this team right here is, for instance, Texas is going to get OU this weekend, and the game is a just disaster. It's just a mess-filled, chaotic, beautiful disaster. That's what rivalry games are. So I always kind of believed that would be a special game, especially with Sark coming. You're going to have a duel of two brilliant offensive minds. And so that's going to be something in and of itself. That game is going to be huge. And now when we look at how Iowa State is playing, I said in the video earlier today, I think that Texas game is going to be OU's most difficult game on the schedule. One, because of how Texas has responded. I'm still very interested to see what Texas's defense is going to be. There's some very talented guys along the defensive front. Ojimo is someone I'm really interested to see how he progresses. And I love the defensive line coach in Bo Davis. Former Alabama guy, NFL guy. If you don't know Bo Davis, you need to know Bo. You need to know Bo. That guy right there is a great recruiter, great coach. I mean, he is really solid. So this is that game is one that I thought would be interesting, but now seeing the state of the Big 12 outside both respective programs in Texas and Oklahoma, I think that's their biggest game each. And especially for Oklahoma, if you've struggled through the early portions of this season, what a better way to make a statement than that game? Now, Jaden asks a question that I think is a perfect one and one that we need to talk about. And it brings up something I want to do here coming up. I want to do a where I was right and where I was wrong, right? Because I've been right in some things in this college football season, and I've been wrong in some things in this college football season. Did I think Oklahoma was elite coming into this year? I thought they could be. Because when you look at it, the ability for teams to return players is massive. It's massive. And we have to understand something. When we go back to preseason, before a game was ever played, when we looked at the major colleges that we thought, okay, well, this team could be in playoff contention, we look around the nation and Ohio State's replacing a quarterback. Clemson is replacing a quarterback. Alabama is replacing a quarterback. All quarterbacks taking over are highly rated guys. DJU is a 5-star. He's having a real rough time right now. But that offense as a whole is having a real rough time right now. I don't know where to start assessing blame there, so we're just going to gloss over that. That I would not want to be Tony Elliott right now. I would not want to be him. So, Bama brings in Bryce Young, 5-star. DJU, 5-star. CJ Stroud was a 4 or 5-star, depending on where you looked. He won Elite 11 MVP. The same year Bryce Young and DJU were coming out. That's pretty good. Think about that. Think about this. Within one state, you had CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, DJU. 1 year, same state, California. So when I looked at that and I see all the talent that Ohio State lost, Clemson lost, Alabama lost, and then they're each replacing their quarterback, you look at Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a team that is retaining a lot of talent. You got a guy such as Kennedy Brooks coming back. You're getting inexperienced dudes from the transfer portal. Oh, yeah. And maybe most importantly of all, you're one of the few teams in the nation in playoff contention that's returning a starting quarterback. Already, I thought that Oklahoma had a leg up on the competition in that regard, in that one regard. You were one of the only teams in the nation that we were talking about in playoff hopes that return a starting quarterback. And it's Spencer Rattler. No matter how you feel about Spencer Rattler, let's put all bias aside and let's just talk upside and talent. That kid is talented, super talented. Now, does that win football games? No, and that's not my contention here. My contention is simply painting the picture of looking from the outside in. I see a team that brings in a quarterback where others don't. I see a team that has had progression under Alex Grinch, and the defense has names that I can look to and be like, okay, well, that's a talented guy. Nick Bonito, Redmond. There's some guys on that Oklahoma defense that are really good. I can't wait to see how Clayton Smith develops. Y'all know how I feel about Billy Bowman, right? Very talented in the nickel position. He's only going to keep getting better. So, yeah, before the season starts, because of that, you have Spencer Rattler going in, returning as a starter under Lincoln Riley. And I think that's the biggest thing, is you look at what Lincoln Riley's done with quarterbacks, you see that he has a return starter, and that's just not clicking. The defense for Oklahoma has improved, right? But it's very hard to gauge how much they've improved when the offense isn't able to sustain consistent drives. And that's one of the only problems with some of these incredibly explosive offenses is if you're not built to sustain drives, it's going to be very hard for your defense to hold up the whole game. You're just think of it from a pure statistical perspective. The more opportunity the other team has to score on your defense, the more likely they are to score on your defense. So if you cannot sustain these drives, your defense, it's very hard for us to see how good it is. We know it's better. There's no denying that Oklahoma's defense has been getting better and better and better, and it looks to have continued to get better this year. But it's very hard to see where they are, how much better, because you don't have any sustained drives on the offensive end of the ball. And that's that's something that's got to change. It's something that's going to kill them. James asked, did I watch Iowa State? Yeah, I did. And I mean, I'd picked Iowa to win that game. And I think when I talked earlier about it, I think Iowa is deserving of moving up. They've looked pretty darn good this year. The Big Ten is going to be very interesting as a whole. It's something I talked about with Ohio State. Yeah, Ohio State drops out of the top 10, but think about it in this perspective right here. All right, think about it in this perspective right here. Ohio State drops out the top 10, but they still have multiple ranked opponents ahead of them. So they control their own destiny. I'm not saying they'll make playoffs. Please, let's not get anything mistaken. But they have the ability to really make up some ground with some ranked opponents here coming up. So the Big Ten's a league we have to watch. How good is Penn State? I don't know quite yet. I'm not sure. They have some good wins. They have some really solid wins. But we're going to find out about a lot of those teams. Zach says football is won in the trenches and the Sooners offensive line has not gelled yet. Yeah, that's exactly, Zach. I'm not sure if you were in here or you just hopped in, but that's something I talked about a little bit ago. If you are not winning the battle up front, you're going to have a very hard time winning the football game. I don't care who you are. It's just not going to happen. Defenses in general seem to have made some real adjustments to the modern offenses. They have, Roger. They absolutely have, but they're still learning. And that's why when we began this, I pointed to two positions in particular. And for those of you that have been around the channel for a while, I'm going to repeat something. And I think now I may not have made myself clear. I think that's one of the things of me being only really a year into covering college football the way that I do, only really been doing this a year, is that I'm still figuring out how to be as clear as possible with some of the things I say. And before the season started, many of you will remember I always said, look, you got a new quarterback, you got some good running backs, and you got a good tight end. You can make some things shake. assuming you have an offensive line that's competent, but you can make some things shake. Why do I say that? Because if we look at how these modern offenses are just terrorizing the defenses, you look at the tight end and you look at running backs out the backfield. Look at the push in modern NFL of how they're using the running backs out the backfield and catching the ball. I mean, it's becoming a must. It's becoming an absolute must. And on the college level, it's been a must. If you don't have a running back that can catch out the backfield, you got to change something because you're putting linebackers in such precarious situations. And that's why we've seen the rise of the pre-snap motion. One of my favorite things in the world, pre-snap motion. I love it. Love it. Roger says, being able to start at Bama is a passport to the pros. That is why and how Saban can manage to enforce discipline. But a lot of other schools, if you push the players too hard, they quit. Yeah, it's something that's a fine line to walk because you have to get individuals to buy into the process. And I think one of the most interesting stories when it comes to Alabama revolves Jonathan Allen a few years ago. And Jonathan Allen was talking about when he was asked, why Alabama? Why did you pick Alabama? And I might be wrong on who it is. I'm 99% sure it's Jonathan Allen. If I'm wrong, somebody please correct me. But Jonathan Allen said at the time, all these people, they come in and they tell me, you're going to start day one at my school. Sign with me. Sign with me. You're one of the top prospects in the nation. Come sign with me and you're going to play day one. He said there was only one coach that told him, I'm not promising that you'll play. What I am going to promise is that I'll give you the opportunity to show why you deserve to play, and I'll give you the opportunity to grow every single day. That coach was Nick Saban. Saban basically will tell recruits, we're going to win with you or without you. So it's completely up to you. And the reason he does that is because what Alabama does is not for everybody. And that's not a problem, right? Like, that's not a problem. Some kids have gone to Alabama, transferred, and had successful careers. It's very rare that a transfer goes on and does something like that, but that's rare across the board. But I mean, we look at Alvin Kamara, buried on the depth chart. He had an injury. He looks in front of him and he sees, a bevy of talented running backs. And he makes that decision to transfer. That doesn't mean he's not an NFL player. It doesn't mean he's not talented. But what Alabama does is not for everybody. It's not just about being talented. Saban is a different cat altogether, man. Like, he is a really interesting dude, a very interesting dude. A lot of OU fans in here saying that the problem isn't Rattler, it's the offensive line, and I couldn't agree more. That's why I made the video the other day. And look, I've been critical of Rattler. I have been critical of Rattler this year, and I feel like the areas where I've been critical of Rattler are completely fair. If I've been unfair in any regard, please let me know where. We can have a conversation about it because maybe I didn't see something. That's always a possibility. And I'm always open to having those conversations. If you don't disagree, I love talking sports. It's an opportunity for us to both learn, see things from the other's perspective, and one of us will walk away with something new. So if I'm not being fair, please let me know. But up until this point, I've been critical of Rattler's decision-making, and I think that it's very indicative. The first throw against Tulane, right? I thought that was indicative of some of the problems leading into this game. But the more and more the season is going on, the more and more you're beginning to realize, like, okay, there have been times where Rattler has had questionable decisions. That's true. But the offensive line is giving them no favors. And I have a lot of people saying, Eric Gray's not that guy or this guy. It's very hard to tell where your running backs are when the offensive line isn't giving them an opportunity. I mean, the other day, remember what I said. Oklahoma, through this portion of the season, has given up 20 tackles for loss. And what was it? 7 sacks, 3 or 4 of them coming against West Virginia. Brandon Offerman, thank you for the $5 saying hook 'em. I can't wait to see y'all's game against TCU this weekend. I cannot wait. Y'all have looked good against Tech and Rice ever since the quarterback switch. I was wrong. I thought Hudson Card was the guy. I still think he's a very talented quarterback. Casey Thompson, man, that team is playing for him. And there's something to be said for that. There's absolutely something to be said for that. So I can't wait to see that TCU game. Offensive mind, defensive mind, it's going to be fantastic. Thank you for the $5, Brandon. That means a ton. It really does. But no, going back to OU, You have people saying that Eric Gray is not the guy. It's impossible to tell anything right now when the offensive line is not giving anybody any time. And the boos, right? That's something I completely disagreed with. You can be frustrated. As fans, we've all been frustrated at our team at a certain portion. Being frustrated and doing that are two different things. And there's a debate going on, right? As to some people are saying, oh, that's soft because in my day we got booed. Maybe you did get booed in your day. But to me, the question shouldn't be that. It should be, was it right when you got booed? No, the answer is no. No matter if you got booed 20 years ago or not, you shouldn't have been booed in a college football game. Not when you're really not the issue. And Spencer was not the issue. He wasn't. The offensive line right now has got a lot of work to do for Oklahoma. They do. They really do. Isaiah Mendoza, thank you so much for the donation, my man. That means a ton. Just y'all coming in and watching, that support means much more than I could possibly say. Brandon with another 5. Thank you so much. The Caleb chant made me feel horrible for Rattler. I don't know about y'all, but when I saw that, it made me uncomfortable when they showed Caleb Williams on camera, because first and foremost, that's messed up to do to Spencer Rattler. That's messed up to do to Caleb Williams. You think he wants to be shown on camera in that situation? That's his brother. That's the dude he's learning from, that he's strapping up to go battle with. And now it's almost like a narrative where they're pitting against each other, but that's not it. That's not it at all. It was unfair and unfortunate no matter how you slice it. And it's something that I hope to not see again. I know some people are saying maybe this will come as a positive, and that's the one thing I will say is the team is rallied behind Rattler, and that's always good to see. I hope that translates into something, but that's never what you want to see. Never in a million years what you want to see. And OU fan, of course, it's not all OU fans. It's absolutely not even a slim minority of OU fans that would have booed. But it's like anything in life. Usually your most obnoxious of any group are the loudest. And that's exactly what we saw. The most obnoxious are the loudest. So we're going to close this out here soon. Before we do, let me know which games you want to talk about. The last thing I want to talk about before we close this out is Alabama, because we've lightly hit on it, but Alabama up to this point, how are they doing? Well, very hard to say. James, I will talk about that because that's a great question. I'll hit this right here before I move on to Alabama. Do you think that scares some OU commitments? I think it does. There's no way to say that it doesn't, but I think that the response from the players says just as much. Right? The response for the players coming and rallying around, that says just as much. Because now you know, like, okay, well, those people can say that, but my brothers are coming for me. They're coming to have my back. And at the end of the day, they're the ones on the football field, right? I mean, our opinions, they're just that, opinions. At the end of the day, they're the ones on the football field. So the thing with Alabama, now I'll close with this. The Alabama Crimson Tide at number 1. It's very interesting because Alabama is a team that has showed a bit of a weakness this year. The offensive line is still gelling, very talented, still gelling. And the defense got a little bit hurt against Florida. Florida showed some ways to hurt Alabama, and it's through the middle linebacking core. The scary thing is when you look at what Ole Miss does, Ole Miss is a team that can really hurt you in that same way. I think one thing that makes me feel better is as long as we can get the inside linebacking core working together, it'll be just fine. It'll be A-okay. Everything will be hunky-dory, and it'll be a fantastic game. But we have got to remain disciplined in that regard, because if not, Ole Miss can hurt us. They can hurt us bad. Flip side, Alabama's offense is really starting to click. The offensive line, I'm really excited to see how they come out against Ole Miss, but the wide receiver production is really starting to come together. Bryce is starting to rep it out with these wide receivers. And Jamison Williams, my goodness. I don't know how Ohio State let him go. I get it. Ohio State has got a very talented wide receiver room, but look what he's doing. Kid averaged, what was it? I tweeted it out, almost 70 yards a touch in a division, like in a college football game, no matter who you play. And he two kick returns for a touchdown. That's crazy. That's a crazy stat no matter who you play. And they still have guys they want to get implemented into this offense. Remember Ajayi Hall. Saban's wanting him to get implemented. He's young. He's learning. That's one we have to watch. Rat says Bama should score 35 plus. Question comes to Henry and Harris in the middle. Have to be better. I completely agree. Completely agree. Hopefully Will Anderson has himself a game. Will Anderson has had himself a game every other portion of this season. He's been fantastic. Bryce has been fantastic. The offensive line needs to be better. Very excited to see where our running game goes. But the defense, this is their time. Ole Miss is a very good team. And here's what I'll leave on. How in the world did Bama open as a 20-point favorite? Like, I'm a Bama fan. I'm predicting Alabama to win. But a 20-point favorite was wild to me. That was a wild spread against Ole Miss. And it's the same thing with Ole Miss not being ranked in the top 10. And I think Ole Miss is being kind of slept on. I talked about this before the season started. ESPN gave Texas A&M and Florida a higher chance to beat Alabama. Now, granted, I was wrong on how good Florida would be. Their rushing attack is the best in the nation. They didn't have that last year. But Ole Miss has been very good. I don't think that it's just a 10% chance that Ole Miss beats Alabama. I'm not saying I think it's a 80% chance. I think Alabama will win that game. But saying that it's a 10% chance is really discrediting Ole Miss. That's a very good team. Coral's a very good quarterback. A very good quarterback. A lot of people asking about Arkansas, and Matt makes a great point. It depends how KJ Jefferson recovers. If he recovers, that's going to be such a great game. That's going to be such a great game, one we need to watch. Absolutely. The last thing I'll answer, as a Texas fan, we should be ranked. Arkansas is a top 10 team, and that's our only loss. However, I'm glad we aren't. More fires to my boys and all that. You know, I answered something like this earlier, and earlier today, I put out a video talking about the new AP ranks, and I made that same argument. I don't know how in the world Clemson is ranked and Texas isn't. I could make that same argument for Maryland, though. Maryland has looked really good. I don't know how Clemson is rated 25, but some teams aren't, especially when you look at who beat Texas and what they did afterwards. It's a very impressive win. Not all wins are created equal. Not all losses are created equal. The nuance matters. The nuance absolutely matters. Bama fans are not sleeping on Ole Miss. No, Rat, let's make no mistake about it. Us fans are not sleeping on Ole Miss, right? We've been very clear in this, but publications have slept on Ole Miss, and it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. We need to do this more. So this isn't going to be the only live stream this week, guys. I will be live streaming on Friday. Come check that out. I will be having guests on that one. I'm cutting this one early because I have to leave the house right now, go take care of some stuff. But I did want to get in a live stream anyways, because this Monday live stream have become a ton of fun for me to do. Ton of fun interacting with y'all. It's always a good time. So we will do another live stream on Friday, and may even do a live stream Saturday or Sunday. I'm not 100% sure which, but I'm going to be getting some guests, figuring that all out. Thank y'all so much for stopping in. Let me know what you'd like to see when we come together on Friday. Drop a comment down below when this officially goes out, letting me know what you'd like to see. I'll get some guests on. We'll highlight some of those topics. I'll watch some games, answer any questions y'all have. It's going to be a great time. Thank y'all so much for coming in. Enjoy Monday Night Football. Drop down in the comments who you think will win, because we have a bitter rivalry on Monday Night Football. And I'm a college football fanatic, but you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be watching Monday Night Football. That's it for me tonight, y'all. Have a good evening. Have a blessed evening, and I'll see y'all on Friday. That's it. See ya.